Okay, now I share. So can everybody see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Thank you. So thank you, everyone. Good to see a lot of known faces, some unknown faces, and lots of my old colleagues from my professional life. And for them, thank you for being here. I was just telling before before I started the recording, that our focus of today's session and webinar is on talking about the eighth competency, cultivating learning and growth, and in that also focusing on facilitates client growth, because that is what this competency is all about. And I think for others who are not into coaching journey, it would be interesting to see how in a coaching journey we look at cultivating learning and growth, and how do we ensure that the client who comes to you takes advantage of this growth. So before I start this, firstly, thank you to Abhyudaya for providing this opportunity for having this webinar. For me, this was a process of discovery, not just discovery of what this competency 8 caters for, but also a discovery of my own, thoughts, my prejudices, the way I used to look at learning and growth, and the way, so I have gained a lot in doing the research that I did for this. And in this deck, I've tried to put together a lot of things which I have collated after hearing quite a few YouTube videos and so many things, reading some articles. And I've tried to bring everything together, which I felt was good for Competency 8. And I hope it will be useful for everyone. Hope to have an interactive session. And before we move on, I think the first question that comes to the mind is that what exactly is the purpose of coaching? What is the definition of coaching? And I would be, something which you could share as to what you feel coaching is all about. So any thoughts? What is the purpose of coaching? Why do we go into coaching?
May I say?
Yeah, please.
So it can be considered as a developmental process, wherein if we look at today's scenario, in the today's landscape, the business are evolving very quickly, and there is not ample bandwidth available with the employer or the managers, but it is moreover better to upgrade the skills of their existing reportees and them. So he has more confidence in them because of the business knowledge. It becomes more important that coaching, via coaching, a development agenda can be set towards the strategic goal.
Okay. No, thank you for sharing, Manoj. Anyone else? What could be the purpose of coaching?
So if I may, I would say for me, it is, how with the help of coaching to maximize the potential that a coachee has.
Yeah, thank you, Ina. That's again quite an apt one. Any other thoughts?
Can I?
Yes, please, Rita.
It's just partnering with their client to get their best foot forward.
Perfect. So I think we have got the answers that I thought will come. So, and these are very relevant points in terms of coaching. And let's look at how ICF defines coaching. So the ICF definition of coaching is partnering in a thought-provoking and creative process that inspires a person to maximize, please note that word, their personal and professional potential. The process of coaching often unlocks previously untapped sources of imagination, productivity, and leadership. And then he says that once you work with a coach, you're on a path to greater personal and professional fulfillment. Then what I thought, let me see how some of the thought leaders in coaching look at coaching. And I got a few definitions which I would like to share. So like Timothy Galway says, coaching is unlocking a person's potential to maximize their own performance. It's helping them to learn rather than teaching them. Then another definition by Peter Carroll says that it helps in making greatest things happen. Then Alan McDonald says that it helps you to go where you want to go. And then Emma Lewis says that what you really want. So basically, all these definitions, if we just see, are primarily talking about growth. So if we have to look at coaching in a small word, it's all about growth in your potential, growth in your capabilities, growth in your professional, personal life, and other things. And out of all the competencies which ICF has got, the 8 competencies that ICF has got, while the process in terms of your learning, your listening skills, your coaching presence, everything is focused on helping the client to grow. But there is one competency which is specifically focusing on learning and growth, and that is competency 8. So what I wanted to really bring a relationship here was that the purpose of coaching is very closely linked to competency 8. And being the last competency, often we spend a very little time on this. And as I'm going to move forward on this journey today, I will highlight some of the things which come into place when we do that. So the competency 8, which talks of facilitates client growth, is defined as partners with the client to transform learning and insight into action. And it promotes client autonomy in the coaching process. Now, when I was looking at this definition, 3 things stood out for me. 1, what is partnering? Number 2, how do you transform learning and insight into action? And number 3, how do you promote the client autonomy in the coaching process? So today, in the next 30-40 minutes that we'll spend, I would like to focus more on partnering with the client, on transforming of learning and insight into action, and how do we give client the autonomy in the coaching process. And then a few things around these, but primarily the whole session is going to be focused on these 3 things. Now, before we move forward, interestingly, I looked at competency 8 and I looked at it totally afresh, and I got some very interesting insights in competency 8. Number 1, when I look at it, the first 2 competencies talk about learning. There is a focus on learning. They talk of what awareness the client has got, how can he bring it in his worldview, what actions is he going to do to implement the learnings. So first 2 competencies of competency 8 talk of with a focus on learning. The next 2 talk with a focus on support. How does the client support the client's autonomy? How does he support his, actions going forward? And then the next 2 are more oriented towards future. What happens after the session? How is the client going to convert what he has learned into actions? How is he going to be oriented in the future? What is going to happen between 2 sessions? And the last one is about celebration. So I found this very interesting that competency 8 can be easily broken down actually into 3 parts: learning, support for post session activity, and then closing, orientation for future and closing. And therefore, in a broad nutshell, one could divide competency 8 into 3 parts: learning, post session actions, and closing of session. So it in a way helps us to just get this entire competency around our mind as to when we are working on it, when we are coaching in a coaching session, what steps and actions we need to take. Then I just thought to quickly go through the markers, and I'm not going to spend time on the markers because we have these markers in the ICF website and we all know it. But very interestingly, the first 4 markers talk of invitation. How do we invite a client? What does the invitation look like? That is the question which comes to the mind. Then the next 4 markers talk of partnering. How do we partner with the client? in doing some of the thinking, in deciding what actions he's going to take. And lastly, how do we celebrate the client's learning and progress? Now, I just want this to be parked because we're going to talk of invitation, we're going to talk of partnership, we're going to talk of celebration. But it stood out for me that out of the 9 markers that are there to check whether as a coach you are following this competency, are clearly 4 are invitational, 4 are as a partner, and 1 is of celebration. And often, I have seen that once we are coaching, by the time I reach the end of the session, by the time a coach reaches the end of the session, he's more like a school teacher, prescribing books, prescribing, something, do this, do that. Whereas this competency talks nothing of that. So there is that natural tendency that session is coming to an end, and we tend to want to give all directions at that point of time to the coaching. Now I want to put the house open and ask some views. What does partnering look like to us? Let's start with some questions. So in partnering, who is in charge? Who has the control?
Both of them.
Okay. Any other thoughts?
They are equally in charge.
They are equally in charge. So the first point is that when we look at partnering, who is in charge? Both are in charge. Now, what does that mean? When both are in charge, as a coach, how will I tell the client that I am a partner?
By asking the right incisive questions
Okay.
and evoking
Yes.
awareness.
Absolutely. Anything else? So when partnering, reflect with your observations, not just the questions, your observations on any visual and energy shifts, which help both the coach and the coachee gain in a generic way. What else could be there? How else can I tell somebody? Because look at the coaching journey as such. When a client is coming to a coach for coaching, a power equation is already getting formulated. A coach is already looking to be slightly higher on the power equation. And the client is, the coach has got the right to ask the question. He can lead the conversation to any direction that he wants. So that's a difficult power that he's got, and he could actually play very well with partnering if he just takes the direction in a different way.
By acknowledging the client and empathizing with him of his values or whatever, the good of the client, as well as acknowledging his talents.
Absolutely. I think, that's absolutely valid. What else could the coach do?
Just be there for him, to hear him.
Yes. Any other thoughts? So another point is that how does a coach reduce the dependence of the client on the coach? So you have to, so many times I have seen that in a coaching journey, we tell the client, okay, give me a phone after 1 week that you've done this. I will follow up with you. I will send you an email. So we are making the client dependent on the coach. How do you make the client independent of the coach in terms of working on his own accountability measures? He has to face his life outside. How can he take this thinking outside in his own way? Other could be, we have a natural tendency. We want to help. How do we get out of this habit of being a fixer, a problem solver, in favor of being a partner to get the best for the client? And what is the best? Who decides the best? Is the client, not me as a coach who decides the best. I may feel that this is the best for this client to do, but that may not be what he wants. So I found this to be a very powerful statement, Get out of the habit of helping others, being good at solving problems. Break the habit of being a fixer. Help the client to find a solution. And then the solution that is best for him, that works best for him. I don't know what works best for him. I'm only there to, so like is written, be useful, not helpful. Other challenge that we face is when a coach bases his merit and value on what the client gets out of the session, he starts with a want. There is already a desire now. How am I help the client? Has he got the right things? And then feel very happy that he's got it. And moment the want comes in, the direction of the coaching changes. Any thoughts, anyone? Sangamitra, you're smiling. Any thoughts?
Guilty of this. That's what I mean. I never thought about it this way. So I'm also I'm also in a very reflective mode right now that this does happen. Yeah, like I'm placing a lot of merit on that, and then the whole equation changes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And as a coach, at least I try to do it from a spirit of helping. I'm doing my best, but that's not the best, the way, coaching is supposed to go. Then also, partnering also means in connecting the client to various sessions, especially when you are in a coaching engagement, which runs through 3-4 sessions, to create a kind of continuity and context within all of the coaching. How is the client changing over the sessions? What kind of shift you are seeing in his worldview? Are there some mental models which are coming into play? So that really is very important. Now, there is one thing which I found it again very empowering to realize, which can really make the dynamics of partnering clear. And that is our pre-coaching engagement, what we call as discovery or, initial discussion with the coachee before we start the coaching journey. I think it's very important that the roles of both the coach and coachee are clearly defined. More often than not, coaches who are coming for the first time into this journey, and lot of them are coming for the first time, have no idea. And if the roles are not very clearly defined, the coachee says, "Aap hame kuch bata hi nahi rahe ho. You're not telling me anything. I have come here for you to give me inputs." So that's what I had on partnering. Anybody has any thoughts that would like to share? Anything that strikes you, any experience?
The only thing that I'd add probably is asking the client where they want to go.
Absolutely, yeah. And that's so correct, huh? Where client wants to go at every stage, and not where I think the client should go.
Yeah.
Yeah. Any other thoughts? That's
So
brilliant.
I think
Yeah.
the hardest thing to accept is, at least for me, the hardest was when, to me, a session made no sense. The end, there was no real action points at the end of the session. But for the coachee, it was there were revelations which came a day later, and so then we had set up more sessions, and I found the pattern going like that. So it was very difficult because I saw no gain, but it worked. It worked for her. So yeah, it's a very tough one when you feel that you're not, when you, according to your barometer, you're not doing anything.
Yeah, absolutely. Because we are all, in a way wedded to the idea that we have to help the client and get something out of it. And great. So I think we have gone over the first part of this definition, partnering. And now comes the very interesting part, which talks about insights. How do you transform learning and insight into action? And I came across this wonderful definition, a wonderful quote by Malcolm Gladwell, which says, insight is not a light bulb that goes off inside our head. It's a flickering candle that can be easily snuffed out. It's that flickering candle that comes up, you know. When that flickering candle comes, what do? You put your hand around it. You let that diya burn. You let that candle get that light. Otherwise, it dies. And so many times in the coaching journey, that candle will flicker. But we will not stay with it. We will not let the client explore that more. And it will go away. Not to get again lighted up, maybe for some time, maybe forever. How does that thought sit with you? So he says, an insight that is not given a chance to form fully might easily be lost by the client. And therefore, you need to create enough space for reflection and integration of what has been learned and how to apply that learning. So many times I have felt that in my hurry to move forward, because I have got some destination in my mind and I'm just letting it go. So this is just, I found it very brilliant. For me, complete this part of this definition is in these 3 lines. Any
Only when
thoughts? Yeah,
It's only
sorry.
when I'm reading. Sorry, Ajit,
Yes,
didn't mean to.
please. Yeah, go ahead, please.
It's just it's still sinking in. It's only when I'm seeing this I'm realizing that is so true, and I've seen um clients move on too quickly, or me moving them on too quickly, and then when you go back and you say, "But a little while ago you had an insight. What happened to that?" And they have no idea,
Hmm.
right? It's disappeared. You thought it was significant, but it's not sunk into them.
Hmm. Yeah, you're so right. I think I have experienced it a number of times. My lost insights may be much more than the insights I have probably had my coaches take with them.
Yeah. And I can relate to it as a coach, and I can relate to it as a client as well.
Absolutely. And then does it happen only in the end? It can happen anytime, right at the beginning of the session. So competency 8 is not for the end, which we generally feel that it's in the end. So just with these thoughts, let's go to the next point. I think again, this as a coach, we have to try to ensure that even the most aspirational and abstract insight could turn into some embodied actions. There are going to be insights which are going to be abstract, which are going to be aspirational. What do you do with them? फिर वो अगली बात आती है which says that all thinking, all planning and no action goes nowhere. And therefore the next points on converting insights into action are more related to, if you don't put into practice what you have learned, you don't anchor it. And only awareness does not take you anywhere. I've got so much of awareness, I have no action. I know I need to walk every day, I need to eat less, I need to do blah, 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 but I don't do it.
I have a question here,
Yes, please.
which is what I've noticed I do with my clients is when the insight is too abstract, I tend to anchor them by saying, what is the smallest baby step that you can take? Convert this into action, right? And the
Yeah,
question that's coming to me is the way I view it when I ask that question is, okay, this is too big, this is too ephemeral. Let's solidify it, right? And let's solidify the smallest one.
absolutely.
But am I in that process shrinking the funnel for the client?
Yeah, that's again it's all contextual at that point of time. Any other coaches have any thoughts? I think.
Can I
What Kshitija has brought out is brilliant point, actually.
can I share something?
Yes,
And Kshitija, I do follow the same thing in life as well. Like when things get too much, like I can't make sense of it. The first thing, path of least resistance, first small step. But as I'm thinking, and this is what I've done once or twice whenever this has occurred to in my conversations, is once they talk about that one tiny step, which is very important because again it links back to the space where we are allowing the client to the choice to take that step, and also kind somewhere validating that, listen, that one step, tiny step, is also important. Then the next question that I usually come up with is that, how do you think, or how do you feel about what is going to be the impact of this step? And that's how link them to the bigger picture that they they might have aspired to be or not talking about. That's one way in which I think, again, since Rajnish said it right, it's very contextual, depends on how it comes up. But I think that's how I have experienced, and I've done that. Okay, this is a tiny step, but we cannot forget the road on which we are walking. So how do you feel that impact? How do you think it would impact? What is the impact that you see? So that's how I would put it.
Thank you. That's extremely helpful.
That's interesting. And that goes back to our adult learning concepts that we had. So make him realize what it is going to do for him. I think that's brilliant. And next point is, again, I love this point. When a client has a new awareness, the so-called aha moment, which we all coaches, go all, I had a aha moment in today's session. What happens in that aha moment? How do you explore the possibilities that come up? Oh, there is a brilliant insight. What next? What possibilities? How do we make the coachee at that point of time aware how he has made the shift, not the shift that has been made. It's how he has made the shift. What happened that he made that shift? Because when he goes out to the world, the scenarios, the situations are going to be same. And if he has an understanding of what made him make that shift, will he be able to encapsulate it in his life outside? Any thoughts?
I'm very curious about this distinction that you've made. Sorry, I seem to be the only voice.
Yeah, no, I think so. Yeah. Even I am not very clear. I can only make out one thing, that at that aha moment, so we look at the aha moment and say, okay, this is what I've realized. What made me realize that? What was the thought process behind it? Because in my day-to-day life, that is what is going to help me. When I go back, sometimes, you have the most wonderful action that or thought that comes to your mind. But moment, like they say, the tire hits the road or the rubber hits the road, everything is forgotten.
The linkages the client has made,
Yeah.
which has led them to that insight.
Yes.
Exploring those and bringing them to the awareness.
Absolutely.
I'm going to try this one.
Yeah. It's a quite interesting one. And I love to be connected with you to see how this goes on, because a lot of these things are new for me also. I am pretty new in my coaching journey. One of the thoughts that came, and sort of an answer to what you are asking, common approach is we check, what are you going to do with this? But we don't check, who are you going to be when you take this action? It is important for the client to look at what he's learning about himself, not just the goals. That is where the whole story lies, I feel. Being an army man, I look at complete action. Action kar do, ye karna hai. What is it that you're going to do? What are you going to be? And when I'm saying it, I have still not fully understood it, but I know which direction I'm going in this. Look forward to hearing any thoughts on this.
So, sir, capturing and measuring the performance, or we can say किसी की भी कैप्चर करना या उसको मेजर करना, so that he can be aware कि वो किस तरह से प्रोग्रेस कर रहा है. That is also very much important.
बिल्कुल
और-
विक्रम, उसमें एक चीज बोलूंगा, जैसे आपने सेल किया, आपने एक महीने में हाईएस्ट सेल किया, तो खाली सेल किया ही नहीं देखेंगे, आपने क्या किया पीछे, आप कैसे
Yes, sir.
इंसान थे, किस तरीके से आपने टीम को मोटिवेट किया, वो
Yes, sir.
चीजें जो दिखती नहीं है रिजल्ट लाने के लिए.
ये सर आजकल का एग्जांपल बहुत अच्छा है, जो आजकल बहुत सारे वेलनेस एप्स आ रहे हैं, उस पे किस तरह से कोचेज असाइन किए जाते हैं और कोचेज उस तरह से समझाते हैं. जो आम मूवमेंट होता है कि वो कोचेज किस तरह से समझाते हैं, क्या उनको गाइड करते हैं, एंड देन जब वेट लूज होता है तो एक आम मूवमेंट आता है कि यस, ये चीज हमने अचीव करनी थी, ये हमने अचीव किया है. तो जो भी मेजरमेंट है वो कैप्चर होती है, तो कहीं ना कहीं एक मोटिवेशन भी आता है उसको आगे ले जाने के लिए.
या
So I think this is a very big one, Rajnish. Thank you for bringing this up, because it's that teach a man how to fish thing. So if he's learning, or the coachee is learning something about himself or herself, then I think they will find it easier to have these aha moments. They will also begin to plot the path themselves. So it's happening to me actually right now, which is why I'm sounding a little things. I'm making the notes, and something that I was struggling with, I'm working out exactly the way you're saying this. So it's I think it's extremely powerful. I'm going to actually think about this and see if I can use it. Same thing that Kshitija said, try it and see how it works. And it's a good
Yeah.
one. Thank you.
I loved it. So I thought, so this is quite interesting. And then I think the next point is, so we've done insights. Huh? I hope I have been able to create some insights, maybe not learning, but certainly some insights. And all of us need to take this learning forward to bring it into action in our coaching journey. And now comes the other interesting part. And I never realized client autonomy can be so important. Huh? And in my coaching journeys, I realized how many times I am actually disempowering my client and a coachee maybe in a session, maybe so many times. So we all know what autonomy is. So let's not spend time, but how will we exhibit autonomy with a coach, with a coachee?
For me, the magic lies in just the language of saying, am I allowing the client to do something, or am I inviting the client into the that language by itself reflects a mindset, and I've had trouble shifting it.
Yeah.
See, I'm not anybody to allow anything here.
Moment
I
you're
can only
allowing, moment the direction is allowing, already एक चैनल बना दिया गया है कि इस चैनल में अलाउ कर रहे हैं.
you're basically thinking, मैं हूँ कौन allow करने वाला, मतलब where did that come from? So I think that one is an important one. The other one is being very conscious, something that you touched on earlier. And I had a question which I rubbed out just today from my vision board. I realized that in my coaching, I was taking charge too often. And that's horribly disempowering for the
Absolutely.
client.
Yeah.
And therefore, I had this question here which said, who is leading? And am I being conscious to say, when is it that I'm creating space for the client to take charge? How am I enabling that?
And unfortunately, it has to be throughout the session, the whole
It
60 minutes of it.
Yeah, nobody told
The
you
last,
this is
the
going to
last
happen.
5 minutes,
These difficult fine print.
मेरे को last 5 minutes I got a license to kill. I take my pistol and tell him, do this, do this, do that. And everything gets finished. I have a very interesting question. So I asked this client, do you visualize any obstacles to implement this? He says, no. What do I do? Do I ask the question again in some other form?
So maybe instead of asking if there are obstacles, you ask if there are any steps towards implementing it.
Okay. Okay. So steps towards implementing, fine. And what about obstacles? What can come in your way? And he says, nothing can come in my way. And I am not convinced that nothing will come in. Something is going to come in his way. My mind is telling कि नहीं, ये नहीं करेगा. So what I realized that if in such a situation, I ask the same question again, I have killed his autonomy. I cannot just go back and do the same. The client doesn't want it. He doesn't want it. It's his world. That for me was a little, disconcerting that, okay, I know that this is what he should be doing. And that comes to, so many times we have seen insights, huh? So many insights. And we feel, okay, this is good, let's do this. But it's the client's choice what he wants to take forward. Would you like to do something on this? He says, no, I think I don't need to do anything on this. And then you feel, oh, itna acha idea aaya tha, kyun nahi kar raha ye? Then he says again, but how about, how can this change your life? He says, no, I don't want to do it. Or he then says, okay, aap itna puch rahe to kuch kar lete hain. Then some practical ideas on how you can make a client realize that they are in charge is to ask simple questions like, help them or support them to reflect on the time you have spent together and the progress that you have made. Make them talk of it, not you tell. Okay, we were here, we've done this, well done, not that, but ask him and support them to realize where they are as compared to beginning of the session. That gives the client a feeling of autonomy. But the realization has to be his. Then help him to reflect on the thinking and feeling that the process has supported. How does that feel? The feeling part, I at least miss out number of times. The what part happens, huh? The feeling part gets missed out. And when we look at competencies, you're going to find so many of them are feeling based and, going in that direction. Invite them to check, how would you like to celebrate? What do you appreciate about yourself? It's a very powerful question. In fact, right in the beginning of the session, sometimes I just was going through one YouTube demonstration of a good coaching session where the coach starts with saying, what's going good in your life? I always start, what's the problem you have? So I always start by looking at problem, but I never build up the positive intent that, okay, what's good in your life? So how is he going to celebrate what he has achieved? Because he has achieved something. He's come into a journey where he's exposed himself. He's shown his vulnerabilities to you. Then what we were discussing some time back, what will this enable you to do in future? What options and opportunities awaken for you if you do this? These kind of things, but most importantly, so of course, the next point is how do you impact, how does it impact your people, impact your future, impact your legacy, whatever is dear to the heart of that client. Then that action sink in, and not to police or parent. Okay, not to police, we don't police, but certainly parent, but partner. And I want to ask a question now. 45 minutes of brilliant session. You feel fantastic insights have come. and you ask the client, Mr. Y, what have you learned today? And Mr. Y goes 180 degrees opposite what you were thinking. Has that happened?
Yes.
Yes, multiple times.
So it's his world. Be prepared to get surprised in Competency 8 or at any point of time. I have my love for solutions. I love this solution. My client doesn't want it. I often have that with my son, in fact, almost on a daily basis. That what he wants and what I want are two diametrically opposite things. His world is working just too well. At his age, he's doing much better than I did at his age. I found this last line to be very interesting. Are you surprised when you ask for insights and the client comes up with something else? Instead of thinking कि इसको कुछ नहीं आता, मेरा सारा session waste हो गया, just change the mind. It's his world. This is what matters to him. So I think we're done with client autonomy. We've done partnership. We've seen insights into actions and autonomy. And I think this is the clear essence of Competency 8. Now, two important other things. What is accountability? Insight आ गई, action decide हो गया, discuss हो गया, okay, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. How do I bring in accountability?
Ask the
Maybe
client.
Hanji,
Ask the client.
ask the client, yeah. Trust the client, yeah, that's, I think, important.
Where I go back on this is when I'm asking the client for accountability, what I'm trying to land is how does this awareness or insight or action that they've agreed to, how does it manifest in real life for them,
Mm, mm.
right? That's what I'm asking accountability for, saying how will you bring this into your real life?
Yeah, that's a very nice way of actually asking this question. So you're not policing, but you're saying, how are you going to imbibe this? How is this going to become part of your life? What is the objective? Objective is to ensure that he's on track. हमने 45 minutes of deep insights, deep learning, some actions have come in. Now the session closes, he goes back. And then he sees before the next session what he's to do, then nothing is going to happen. I think the whole life of coaching is between two sessions. I personally feel that life of coaching happens between two sessions when the client goes out and faces the world.
Mm.
If that something is changing, then coaching is making a difference. If insights are coming, awareness is coming, he's writing good reviews, but nothing is happening once he goes out. And therefore, accountability becomes very important. But also, it's more towards policing side. I have done accountability on policing side. I have coached Sangamitra and she knows it. How will you do it? When will you do it? So it goes more into policing side. Then other thing is, does he report back to coach? Does the coach remind him?
No.
No. It's emphatic no. I think it's an emphatic no now. But in my earlier phases of life, I used to send a WhatsApp message and I used to check with people, send an email note. This is what we have decided. This is what you will do. But I realized that is not.
I asked them, how will you hold yourself accountable?
Yeah, again, that's a brilliant question. And that leads me to my next bullet point, actually. So important to ask, explore with the client. Is he someone who sticks to the plan? Does he have some way of reminding himself? What are his ways of bringing in accountability? And supposing the client tells, "Aap bataiye," then what do you do? So, open to all, especially the coaches in this room, the client has asked, "I don't know. You tell me." What are you going to answer?
This is a question that I am scared of as a coach.
Okay.
Because I want to respond to saying that आपका goal hai, but then you can't, you know. So I'm
You
thinking,
can, but you
yeah,
can.
but
There's nothing which says you can't.
Yeah.
no, it's also the way of how do you put it out. Like how much ever I want to be like, okay, yeah, it's your goal.
So
But yeah,
depending on the kind of relationship I have with my client, what I have done is, and by the way, I don't get it right all the time. But I'm very lazy. I refuse to take accountability. That's what drives me.
Mm.
Um, and therefore, the things that I do with the client is, if the client turns around and says, "Aap bataiye," if I have a easy relationship with the client, I'll say, "Nice try. Let's do this again."
Okay.
Yeah. If we have that rapport. If we don't have a rapport, it's a more serious client, and um, they say, "Aap bataiye." Like, let's take a moment. If there are no other options, maybe I'll offer some suggestions and we can brainstorm them together. Let's start with, what are the things you know work for you?
No, I think that's brilliant, Kshitija. And there's so many, context will differ and there's so many ways. But we will come into some such, tricky situations. What have you learned about yourself? Nothing. What do you do?
It's
So,
actually happened to me.
yeah. So what do you do?
Self-managed.
Yeah, at that point of time, you say, okay, nothing. So what can we do better next time? How can we show up better? How can I show up better next time for you? How can I relate? What are the areas we might have missed? Let's say we come after a session and there were not six is very high. Okay. There's the army man in me speaking. So let's say there were a couple of actions to be done. And how do I ask the client? Do I ask him?
So, Rajnish, I'm feeling a huge amount of discomfort with just the idea of saying, what can we do better? Just
Yeah.
because the client does not have insights at the end of the coaching about themselves. So if I ask a client saying, "What have you learned about yourself today?" The client says nothing, right?
Yeah.
That does not mean the coaching wasn't effective,
Correct.
and it needs to be better.
Yeah. So I think another question could be, what does nothing mean? What is nothing to you?
Yes. Yes.
And that opens up Pandora's box. Huh? Again, what is nothing to you?
And it requires self-management to not get into that hook of saying, "Oh my God, this
Yeah.
session
Yeah.
has crashed and burned."
And therefore be prepared to be surprised, to be shocked. There is that word, I think, in this Competency 3 or somewhere where he says that coach is what I'm forgetting the word, which is balanced and grounded. Stay grounded. The highest power of lightning strikes you, your grounding is going to help you stay there. It's not going to burn you. It's not going to cut the tree into two parts.
Yeah.
So that grounded bit is very important. So one option could be for such a situation that we said, if the client asks you what to do, sorry, I think what has happened? 1 second. So in that case, one way could be to just say that, okay, I have seen that XYZ works for others. I have seen some people keep notes. I have seen some people tell it to somebody. I have seen some people use electronic reminders. I have seen some people have a checklist. They check it every day. So options are multiple. you could see what works for you. So here you're not being directional. Client has asked you a question, you're still giving him some ways, some solutions, which are not solutions per se. You're laying down maybe the landscape for the client. And the last part, which I found again very interesting, was acknowledgement. And lot of places he says acknowledge. How do you acknowledge? And is the acknowledgement only towards the end of the session?
Notice the qualities that the client has displayed in the
Yes,
session and call them out, acknowledge those, who the client has been.
absolutely.
Um, the other way of acknowledging is also the values. If the values have been mined, then the values that the person has showcased, has honored, has held
Absolutely.
in
Yeah.
the choices that they've taken.
Yes. Any other thoughts?
If it's a very difficult conversation, then when client stays in the room, I also acknowledge them for just being courageous, for just showing up and staying.
Yeah. Being courageous, being exposing themselves, coming out with some information, some data points which are very troubling, diving deep into their, fears, their vulnerabilities, coming out of them. And I find this is again extremely important. And it's totally, again, it goes back to the client autonomy, to your coaching presence, to your everything. And I think I thank Abhidya for making me, pick up one competency and working more deep into it. It gave me great insights. And so some of the simple ways could be, while you can acknowledge throughout the session, Competency 8 gives you a wonderful opportunity at the end of the session to acknowledge something you saw, something sincere you want to celebrate with the client. Could be an attitude, could be the words that stood out for you, could be an insight, could be a strength the client has exhibited, could be something of their talent, skill, their character, maybe the progress they have made. But this is a medicine which has to be given with total sincerity. It's not to be done because it's good to do and it's in the marker list and ICF will tick the marker that he has shown, done, is acknowledged. I was actually, till some point of time in my coaching, doing it as a marker. Marker tick ho gaya, whatever that 8.2, 8.3, whatever that was. So it's about taking a moment, thinking all you have seen and heard, find something that feels true, using your intuition and sharing it. It has to, if your acknowledgement is with something that the client really feels proud of or values, imagine the kind of trust you build with the client. And then in the last few minutes of the session, closing with the client, when you say, with these are the last few minutes, is there anything else we need to include or cover? I find that closing is, how would you like to close? What do you want to do? How do you want to, it's actually preparing the client to go back and face the life after this session. And depending on how intense or in which direction the session has gone, how do you prepare the client to go back? So I think the mostly done with the few important points. Now, next 3-4 minutes, I just want to quickly link up everything together. And while I read this number of times, while going through this competency, I realized coaching's process can be simplified in terms of sequencing. And when we look at all the all the competencies that are there, competency 3 and competency 8 have got a time to it in a way. While contracting can also happen, recontracting can happen throughout the session, but beginning of the session, contracting has to happen. And end of the session, you have to see where you have reached. And rest all competencies, ethical behavior, coaching presence, learning, all those things embodies a coaching mindset. Everything runs through the entire session. And while 8 is not confined only to the end, and 3 is not confined only to the beginning, they have much more bias towards the beginning and end. And a simplified coaching process could be contracting, then the whole lot about solutions when you're finding solutions to what the client wants to achieve. And the last part is call for action. So I'll not go into details of this. I share it in the deck. Some points I've written on this, but I think we are coming to the end of the hour now. And then in competency 3 also, as I was saying, can be divided into 3 major actions: learning, post-session actions, and closing. And I was reading somewhere, 15 to 20% time in competency 3, 15 to 20% time in competency 8, and balance time in finding solutions. And while coaching is so dynamic that you cannot put values and numbers, but it certainly tells one thing, that so many times I have realized 5 minute reh gaye, ab session close karna hai. Ending something inappropriately, and I wrote in my note that Abhyudaya shared, watch a movie and it gets over and वो सारे नाम आने शुरू हो जाते हैं and you're wondering कि क्या हुआ यहाँ पे. I have had it number of times. So don't leave that open. Close it properly. So I think with this, I have come to the end of today's presentation part. Any thoughts? Any questions?
Very, very insightful session. Thank you for spreading it out and catching the nuances.
Thank you. Thank you, Kshitija. Your inputs were really very great. Sanghamitra, thank you.
So Rajnish, I think at the start of the session when you said, and I mean, it just brought out a kind of a, I would say, a bias that I have, which is when you said that this competency features at the end, and hence we don't pay attention. We say, okay, that should come at the end. I just realized that I have this bias. I was like, yeah, I mean, somewhere I didn't realize that, like in my head, it was like, okay, that's the last thing I need to worry about, because we are so used to checklists, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in terms of priority. Numbers are given for a reason, but it also grades it in a certain way. So that was something that I was hit at first. I'm like, okay, this session is going to be different. That's where I think you kind of started. For me, it was like, I got to pay attention. There's more coming in. But yeah, it was really, really insightful. I think what I loved about it is so, you made it so very easy you broke it down into pieces that we could chew. And there are still some pieces that probably I'll sit and think and chew on as I go back. So thank you so much for doing all the research that you said and bringing it for us.
No, thank you. It's a wonderful world, I realize. There are so many nuances to the simple process of coaching, and it was a pleasure for me to put everything together, and I am thankful to so many of my JK Cement and other friends here who have just come because I am there and they're not into coaching. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Subhash. Thank you, Arvind. Thank you, Manoj, Nirmal, Kamlesh, Sharat. Thank you. You all are great. So can I close the session? Stop recording? So as they say, as